everybody. It's an exciting day for me to give this presentation, but also an exciting day for the country. So, let's see where we are in half an hour. So I didn't go on my scholarship experience for as long as Leah did. I did 6 weeks, and I was looking at violence intervention models and expanding care for those that fall through the gaps. Before I start and give you the bulk of what I found and my key learnings, I want to talk to you a little bit about my personal highlights and also give thanks. I'm going to start with thanks actually. So here we go. So of course I want to thank the Roosevelt Scholarship. It's something that I've wanted to apply for many, many years. I first came to know of it in 2018, and it wasn't until 2023 that I made the application. So if there are people in this room or people that know of people that want to apply, 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 apply. It's a life-changing experience, and I'm so glad that I made the application and was lucky enough to receive the award. I want to thank my mentor, Alicia Denton, for supporting me for many, many months in the prioritisation of getting ready for such a life-changing experience. I also have to highlight 2 particular federal organisations in America who, without we went through conversations, but they put together a stellar itinerary for me, and that's LA County Department of Public Health and the Office for Gun Violence Prevention in Washington, DC. And with that, I also have to thank the people that shared their hearts and their homes with me, and that's Dr. Amy Mack of OGVP and Jimmy and Cassandra Foster from the College of Charleston. And with that, where is he? There he is, Graham Moran. I have to thank him. Last year he was in the audience and I gave my short speech about what I wanted to do and what I wanted to achieve, and he connected me to the College of Charleston and made that happen. So I thank you for the work we've done in the past and the work I know that we'll continue to do in the future. And finally, but not finally, thank you to my friends, my family, my partner, and to my organisation, Think Forward. One of my managers is here today, Irene Kenny. Thank you for enabling me to go on this opportunity, for believing in me and allowing me to go forth with this experience. So, who am I? I think that's important in relation to talking to you about the project that I went to America to know more about, which is serious youth violence. So I'm a youth justice graduate. I studied here at Nottingham Trent University and graduated in 2015, which, oh my God, was 10 years ago next year. I've got a fellow graduate over there in Dario Prosser. I cannot believe that it's been almost 10 years. For those 10 years, I've worked in the community, and I've worked with vulnerable families, children and young people across various different sectors in health, in hospitals, in schools and third sector organisations. I'm an accredited careers advisor, life coach and safeguarding practitioner. Something that was really pertinent to me, and I think that led me here to be in front of you today, was in 2018 I was part of the launch of the first hospital violence intervention programme, and that was in the Queen's Medical Centre. It was the first violence intervention programme to be launched outside of London, and it sought to support 2.5 million people across the East Midlands who were victims of serious violence. And we worked for many, many years, up until recently actually, that it's been unfortunately cut. And one of the reasons that I'm here with you today, and I'll go on to talk to you about a case study of one of the individuals, but they moved me, they made me feel so passionate about getting involved in investigating the gaps that currently exist in our systems. And I was born and raised in Nottingham, there you go. Okay, so before I go into the bulk of my presentation, I'm going to give you some personal highlights. So I did 6 weeks in 6 states, all the way from California to New York to South Carolina to Chicago. And what an empowering situation for me as an individual, as a young female going out to navigate that by myself. It was life-changing, as Leah and the previous scholars have alluded to. I have to highlight Homeboy Industries, based in Los Angeles. They claim to be the biggest gang rehabilitation facility in the world. And you'll see here myself and a wonderful woman who was my tour guide on my last stop in LA of the scholarship. And she took me through the facilities, and these facilities took on people that were exiting incarceration and gave them a job, gave them purpose, gave them kinship, gave them a way forward. She told me that in 1985 she was incarcerated and she became a part of the prison population. It was only in late 2023 that she had been released. Decades and decades and decades in the prison population. She'd come out to a world where there were self-driving cars. She'd come out to a world where there was robots delivering her takeout food. She'd come out to a world with touchscreen phones. And all of the other things that have changed in the last 40 to 30 years since she was incarcerated. But Homeboys Industries gave her kinship, gave her hope, gave her a job, gave her guidance. What an incredible woman. And what an incredible way to end my 6 weeks in the United States. It will always stay with me. There are many things that I would want to highlight in terms of my personal highlights. One of the things is, if you haven't been and if you're thinking about going, Washington, D.C. It's a place that is federally funded in terms of their museums. You can spend 1 to 2 to 3 weeks just going in and outside of the museums that are available to you, from the Holocaust Museum to the African American Museum to the NASA Museum. It's all free, it's powerful, it's important. What a great place to be. This is really random, but salads. Americans do salads really well. Okay, so that is just one thing that stayed with me. And most importantly, being able to share ideas with like-minded people and professionals, to break bread with people, to sit round their tables and in their homes and talk to them about youth violence and to talk to them about the things that are important to them. It was incredible. So, I want to be sensitive about the topic that I'm talking about today. I will be speaking about serious youth violence, and I recognise that there may be people in the room that have been directly impacted by it. If you need to take a moment and go outside and come back in, absolutely fine. Take care of yourself, that's the priority. If you need to speak to me after the fact, please do that as well. So, just to be clear, my project explores best practice intervention models in violence prevention. Some pictures of the amazing people and projects that I worked with whilst I was over there. So you might ask, why youth violence? Why is that important? The World Health Organization defines youth violence as violence that occurs between individuals ages 10 to 29. Most commonly, youth violence is a symptom of inequality, deprivation, adverse childhood experiences, trauma, and a lack of resources. It's the third leading cause of death amongst people in that age bracket. I thought it was quite interesting that the WHO writes that one of the key risk factors of youth violence is the way that a society governs its policies. Nottingham is one of the most deprived areas in England. You may have known that, you may have not. But Nottingham is one of the 18 cities that receives more funding to tackle the issue of serious youth violence. In essence, as much as we all love and live in the city, we have a problem. So, with Nottingham facing more cuts to its public service and its vital services, now, just like before, it's important that we raise the consciousness of the issue of youth violence. So, I'm going to read you a case study. This case study is really important to me because it's a person that I know and that I worked with in 2018 and is probably the reason why I'm standing in front of you today. Before I read the case study, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the context around youth violence. So the part of the brain that understands planning, risk, decision making doesn't develop until your mid to late 20s. That's for everybody. The brains of children that have experienced trauma and adverse childhood effects, they develop differently to their counterparts. they are at increased risk of developing mental ill health. So I say this to say that the shift between childhood and adulthood is not linear, and understanding the context behind youth violence is really important. So now I read you this case study of a young person that I know and that I worked with in 2018. And I ask you to ruminate and think about what we should do as a society for a young person like patient X. You have been called to a major trauma incident in A&E. The doctors and research tell you that they have managed to stabilise the patient and would like you to speak with an 18-year-old boy in Bay 1. The 18-year-old, let's call him patient X, has been stabbed in the arms, chest and leg and will need a catheter whilst he's in hospital. The doctors tell you he will probably be in for the next 2 weeks and he's lucky to be alive. Patient X turned 18 3 weeks ago. He had been walking down an alleyway 3 minutes from his home address when he was approached by a group of men on bikes in balaclavas. He tells you that he can remember thinking he was probably going to die and that he could see his friend. You ask him more about this. Only a few months ago, patient X had witnessed his friend being stabbed to death in the same alleyway. He could not intervene until it was too late. Patient X said as it was happening to him, he felt at peace in some way because he could see his friend. He was terrified about being discharged from hospital. He lived at home with his mum and his siblings, only 3 minutes away from where the almost fatal attack occurred. He tells me this wouldn't have happened if he'd just grown up somewhere else. Patient X has limited options because now he's legally an adult and he's 18. Patient X had on and off statutory involvement with social care, but he was not in care. Therefore, he has no continued statutory support from the local authority. Adult social care are unable to help patient X because he does not meet their criteria. I ask you to think about how we should support patient X as a society as I go through the rest of the presentation. So, public health approach to violence. What I noticed when I was in America with, again, as I mentioned, like-minded professionals who do brilliant work is that in the spaces of both the United Kingdom and America, we both recognise that violence is a public health issue. Why? Because it's preventable. I always think back to this example of public safety, which was in relation to seatbelts. So many years ago, people didn't wear seatbelts, and then there was campaigns, there was awareness raised, laws were changed, and minds were changed, and as a consequence of that, lives were saved. I believe we should adopt the same approach when we're thinking about serious violence. The public health approach works by providing a framework which seeks to understand what causes violence and responds with interventions to prevent or reduce violence throughout a lifetime for individuals that are at risk. I call on all services, statutory and voluntary, to recognise this and work together in a joined up way to provide vital services to those at risk in schools, hospitals, custody suites, primary care and the local authority. Lots of individuals and services are already doing this. I call on more to do the same. Like me and many others, we believe that violence is a public health crisis. My American colleagues and friends who I spent time with believe the same thing. Violence is estimated to cost the NHS £2.9 million every year. By adopting a public health approach, violence can be prevented. A range of different interventions throughout the course of life for those at risk can reduce propensity for violence. And I truly, in my heart, believe in this statement. Violence and deprivation are preventable, not predictable. And that is a quote also from the Public Health England. So whilst I was in America, I had the most incredible opportunity to spend time with it, as I've mentioned, Washington DC, LA, South Carolina, Chicago, etc. And I would be more than happy to speak to you individually about all of the projects that I got the honour of spending time with, but we're of course time limited. So I wanted to shout out a couple that really stood out to me. So first of all, Community Action for Peace. So this was in East LA, 99% Latino community. And what they did, this is the Public Health Department, federal government, asking that communities meet monthly. It's not just the federal government, it's not just the victims, but it's also the interventionists and the people working on the ground. It's bringing everyone together, to work together, to hear each other, to empower one another, and to be accountable for one another, actually. And the federal government had a £10,000 budget that they were giving to this community in East LA. And they asked people to pitch, like I'm doing now, in front of community, in front of the communities impacted by violence. They would say, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and it would be up to the people of the community to say, we think that's good, that will suit our people, and move forward. And that was, for me, community action in progress, happening in front of me, and it was incredible to be a part of. Something else I saw in LA, I'm particularly impressed by services that meet the need of where the people are, instead of being kind of in difficult areas that people can't quite access. This was a youth bus that worked in collaboration with the local government, with the community, and that went out to areas where they knew things were likely to escalate or their issues might be. And on that bus, of course, there was the fun stuff, there was the the Game Boy, the games, whatever, but there was also the careers advisor, the mentors, the health professionals, and they were of the community and they were for the community, and they went out and did outreach community work where it was needed, and I thought it was incredible. So these were some of the prevention strategies that I noticed and was able to be honoured to be a part of during my time in America. And importantly, the definition of prevention is the action of stopping something before it has happened. Intervention, also very important, because we live in a society where, yes, we believe that prevention is important and it's probably the key road that we want to go down, but at the end of the day, serious violence happens, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be responding to it as and when it happens and as and when we need to. Here's me in the John A. Wilson building with the Credible Messengers and Dr. Amy Mack, who I mentioned at the start of the presentation. And here's me at the College of Charleston with some incredible scholars, academics, interventionists. What an amazing experience. I wasn't quite ready to do a presentation in front of 100 people, but that's the beauty of the scholarship. It pushes you outside of your boundaries, it pushes you to places that you might not want or feel that you're ready to do, but you are ready to do it. So some of the interventionist organisations that I was particularly impressed by, this was in Los Angeles, so funded by the federal government as part of the COVID recovery bill. Crisis response teams were going out to incidents that were police incidents, but you also had, where appropriate, social workers, mental health workers, and community intervention practitioners, meeting the needs of victims and survivors in all of the ways that a serious incident requires. And the police, I spoke to the police and sheriffs and organisations that are in policing, and they said, this is what we want. We're not always trained in the way that the social workers, that the mental health professionals, that the violence interventionists are trained. And again, harking back to the public health approach, it's so important that we have a joined up approach to responding to serious youth violence. And this was an example of how it can work really, really well. I was incredibly impressed by this. GVROs. I think this could potentially be controversial, And you know that state to state they have different laws depending on where you are. This was Los Angeles County, and they had recently had an initiative of gun violence restraining orders. And what this means is that peers and loved ones can reach out to local authority and express to them that they're concerned that their family member or loved one has ownership of a gun and is likely to use it and their mental health is deteriorating. Why I think this is important is because in America, a lot of the families and people that I spoke to had been victimised by their own weapon. So yes, in this country, we know that owning knives and guns is illegal. That's not the case, of course, in America. This allows for individuals to have that lethal weapon removed from them from a period and brought back to them once the support from the community has been received to that individual. That is why I think that particular initiative is beneficial. It is only when we have a policing response in unison with a community response that we do the right work. So some key recommendations. With it being a general election day, I couldn't not. I'm really passionate about these things, and these are things that I've thought for a long time, and it's a blessing for me to stand in front of you all today and kind of be able to share this, because this is what I think should happen moving forward for young people in our society. I believe that we should support local authority to fulfil their duties to young people and vulnerable adults by strengthening adult social care, as they have done already in Wales. In Wales, adult social care recognises and gives statutory support to those who will not be able to achieve their personal outcomes without the support from local authority. I once again ask you to think about patient X and how he would have benefited from that. I also say that immediate accessible specialist PTSD aftercare should be offered to those that have experienced or witnessed serious violence. And when I say accessible, I mean accessible. As somebody that has worked for 5 years in the NHS and in this space, it is currently not an accessible aftercare option. I really believe that we should, this is very on trend, but call for cross-party coalition to work beyond political lines, whether you're red or blue, whatever you do, it doesn't matter. We should have a serious youth violence task force, which we did have for a period of time, but we should have it and we should commit to it and we should keep working towards it, no matter what your persuasion is politically. We should be invested in our next generation. And I really, this is something you guys can have a look at it at a later date, but the National Youth Agency has an incredible manifesto around what they think should happen moving forward for young people and the next generation, and I thoroughly back the appointment for a dedicated youth minister. It's, to me, a travesty that we don't have somebody in Parliament currently that represents young people and the generation that will next be the leaders and supporters of the world that we live in. So I leave you with a little quote, and it is, remember, investment in our youth today is an investment for the health of us all and the communities we live in and love. Thank you.